Welcome dan selamat datang di acara Film Workshop, yaitu salah satu rangkaian acara dari Indonesian Contemporary Art and Design 2018 yang tahun ke-9 kalinya. ICAD ini sendiri itu organized by Yayasan Design and Art Indonesia. Kami sebelum memulai acara Film Workshop pada hari ini ingin berterima kasih kepada strategic partner kami, yaitu Badan Ekonomi Kreatif Indonesia, Artura Insanindo, Grand Kemang Hotel Jakarta. Selain itu, acara ICAD ini sendiri itu juga disupport oleh Artura Designer Shop, Angka Fortuna Cinema, dan Panasonic. Kami juga ingin berterima kasih kepada institution partners, Kamar Dagang Indonesia, Dewan Kesenian Jakarta, Koalisi Seni Indonesia, Himpunan Desainer Interior Indonesia, Himpunan Desainer Mebel Indonesia, Asosiasi Desainer Grafis Indonesia, Asosiasi Produser Film Indonesia, Motion Picture Association, and also British Council. Acara ICAD ini sendiri tidak hanya disupport oleh institution partners, namun banyak media partner yang turut ikut serta dalam ICAD tahun ini. Kami ingin berterima kasih kepada official TV partner kami, Metro TV, kemudian media partner kami ada Indonesia Design, Inklover, Casa Indonesia, L, Now Jakarta, Style and Decor, Dewi Magazine, Archinasia, Asrinesia, Detik.com, Tribunnews.com, FIFA.co.id, Good News from Indonesia, Blueprint, Liputan6.com, Satulingka.com, Sugar and Cream, Event Journal, Republika.co.id, LanangIndonesia.com, Ruang, Nilon Indonesia, HangoutIndonesia.com, Cubicle, What's New Indonesia, Whiteboard Journal, Indo Art Now, Indonesia Luxury, Gush Cloud, Discover City, ID, Hipwi, Manual Jakarta, Social Media, Provoke Magazine, Hipwi, Event, and H&M.com. Kemudian pada hari ini kami akan melaksanakan film workshop dengan 2 sesi. Please welcome our special guest for today's workshop, Mr. John Cooper, and also as the moderator today, Mr. Steven Jenner. And also for the second session, Mbak Mira Resmana. So please welcome and give a round of applause for Mr. Steven Jenner.
Selamat pagi. Nice to see you all. See some familiar faces here today. We've been coming here for a few years and hosting these workshops, and you guys keep coming back, so we must be doing something right. Look, I just want to say thanks to our good friends, Edwin, for organizing this. Thanks to Faustin at APROFI for partnering with us again. I know a lot of you are producers, right? Yeah, producers, directors. And also to Pak Firwan and Beckroff, another great partner of ours. So today we're really excited to have with us a good friend of mine, an amazing executive producer, unit producer, financial producer, man of many talents, John Kuiper. John is an American, but we won't hold that against him because he really wants to be an Australian, and who wouldn't want to be an Australian, right? He also spends a lot of time in Cape Town because he shoots a lot of movies in South Africa. John has a credit list too long to remember. But he is, I love meeting up with him because he's always got a story from a set, and they're great stories. He's supremely accomplished in what he does. He's in great demand. When I asked him if he would come join us for this, he said, well, I'll let you know right at the last minute because, you know, I've got an offer to do 3 possible productions, and one of them might happen tomorrow, and I might be on a plane, and then you'll have to find someone else. But When that didn't come through, I said, oh, sorry about that, John, but really I was going, yes, we get you into Indonesia. So we've been here, we've been here in town, and we're really enjoying being back in Jakarta. And without any further ado, this is about giving John all the time we can get out of him. He's going to give us a bit of a presentation, and then we're going to have a chat, all of us. Okay? So, sound good?
Good.
Great. So, John Kuiper.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and also great to be back with you, Stephen. We should take this on the road. In fact, we have, I guess. It's great to see all of you here. I'm happy to be here. I've never been to Jakarta before. I've been to other places in Indonesia, and I've been kind of all over the region. And that's one of the great things about this business that I chose early on. It's taken me all over the world, and it's gotten me access to meeting people and being introduced to cultures and places that I never would ever see. So one of the perks of the industry is it's kind of a small community, but it's a global community. So you'll be meeting people, hopefully all over the world. So as you know, this year's theme for ICAD is Kisah, or story in English. And as human beings, we tell stories with words and pictures and song and dance and films, which I think is interesting because film uses all of those media together. Since the dawn of humankind, we've been telling these stories, and we hand it down through generations to teach lessons and retain and enrich our culture, which is obviously very important. But it's also just to entertain sometimes. So one of the things what I studied to get into the film industry was English literature. It was literature, it was storytelling. It wasn't film, it wasn't photography, it wasn't any of those things that you would think. And I think that was very fortunate for me because much of what I've learned, and I would hand it to you guys, many of you are producers and directors and writers and other professionals. So much of what you learn about film can be learned on the job. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that film school isn't good, but just because you haven't gone to film school doesn't mean you can't be a great writer or director or producer. Look at Joko Anwar, for instance. He's someone who didn't have access to a film school and ended up going to become a journalist, learning about film, and then doing it. So that, I think, is the core of what I'll be talking about today, is really just doing it. Not discounting yourself because you can't do it, because, I didn't go to film school, so I can't be a director, I can't be a producer. It's about just do it and know that you don't know everything. And sometimes not knowing everything is a great asset. That's kind of one of the things that I want to talk about. So the other thing I want to talk about is, as a producer, one of the things we're always doing, and I'm sure you have experience with this, is adjusting your film to the budget. And sometimes you have no budget, sometimes you have a little budget, sometimes you have a nice budget, sometimes you have a huge budget. So it's about adjusting your story to your resources. And I think that at the end of the day is probably the biggest challenge for a producer. And to a certain extent a director, and many people I'm sure here are producer and director, so you have to do both. So I'm gonna kind of get to what it is to be, for me, there are different kinds of producers, and so we'll talk a little bit about the kind of producer that I think I try to be. As a film producer, it's my job to enable the filmmaker to tell his or her stories. We'll get to this in a second. And I helped design the plan, put together the team, write the budget, the schedule, maximize the resources, and ultimately execute the director's vision. So when I started out, I took any job I could, whether it was for free or for very little money, but I always said yes, because you never know what that opportunity is going to give you. If you say yes, then, to the world, then hopefully the world will sometimes say yes to you. It's not guaranteed, but at least you put yourself in the game. And one of the opportunities that I got was I said yes to a job which I thought was going to be very boring. It was working for someone who was trying to buy Roger Corman's library. Well, Roger Corman, I don't know if you know Roger Corman, but he's like a famous kind of a B film producer, and many famous writer, director, producer, actors worked for him in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And there's an alumni list that's really pretty impressive. James Cameron, Martin Scorsese, Ron Howard, Francis Ford Coppola, Jack Nicholson, Sylvester Stallone, Dennis Hopper, among many others. So I was working, it was kind of like being a legal clerk. It was very boring. I was looking through contracts and all this kind of stuff. And one day, the production guy from Roger Corman said to me, "What do you do? I mean, are you a lawyer, or what do you?" I said, "No, I'm a producer." Even though I had only produced one short film for zero money, but I'm a producer, So he said, "Really? Well, we need a producer down at the studio. Would you be interested?" So we went out to lunch, we talked about it, and I did have some experience. I had done a lot of assistant directing. I had worked for a producer at Paramount Pictures, so it wasn't like I knew nothing. But at the same time, I hadn't really produced anything, And so I ended up becoming one of the production managers at Roger Corman's studio, And I mean, that's super lucky. But again, it's saying yes, and putting yourself in that position and not saying, "I can't do this." It's saying, "I can, or I'll try," So it's risk-taking. So yeah, I mean, when after Roger Corman, many years later, I had the opportunity to work for Warner Brothers Studios, and again, that was one of those weird. It's always weird in this industry, you kind of like you put yourself in a position to get lucky. I think I say it all the time. You make your own luck. You know what I'm saying? You make your own luck. So I was producing kind of directed to DVD movies, and then I was line producing independent films, and I was kind of going back and forth. And one day, Warner Brothers started this little division of these small DVD movies, like sequels, anything with a 2 or a 3 or a 5, we did Lost Boys 2. You probably didn't know there was a Lost Boys 2. We also did Lost Boys 3. You definitely didn't know there was a Lost Boys 3. But they were fun movies. I mean, they were small budgets with a franchise, you know what I mean? So we were doing these kind of low budget sequels, and sometimes we would do prequels. Like, do you remember Tremors? Okay, so I did Tremors 4. Didn't know there was a 2 or a 3, I know, but 4 is the best one, because we go back in time to the 1880s, and it's a Western with the Tremors guys eating everybody, and it's a lot of fun. Anyway, so I was doing all that stuff, and so they opened a division that did these movies, and so I was working for the biggest studio in the world, doing the smallest movies that they made. And hey, you know what? That's great. I mean, it was an incredible experience, and what was amazing was nobody at the studio, nobody knew how to make a movie under, say, $10 million. Now, these movies were like $3, $4 million, which is still a lot of money. I mean, but to make a studio movie for that kind of money is insane. So we got a lot of freedom to make these movies, and we had a lot of fun. And we'll talk more about that. And then I went on, so after that little division at Warner Brothers, I ended up, because I was doing these smaller movies, getting opportunities to do some of the studio movies. And then eventually, the head of production from Warner Brothers asked me to go to Australia to start supervising production on their biggest movies like Mad Max and The Great Gatsby and The Hobbit and part of Pacific Rim and other things. And so, again, you kind of make your own luck. I put myself in a position, or I was lucky enough to get into a position where I could, make something of it. So then I went on to Lionsgate, and then I started doing independent films, and I produced this movie with Sean Penn as the director. Sean Penn, you all know him as an actor, but he also directed, this is his 6th film as a director. His film prior to this was sorry? No. He acted, he won the Academy Award for acting in that, but it was, it's the one in Alaska, the kid,
something in the wild?
Into the Wild. Into the Wild. Thank you very much. Sorry, I spaced on that. Into the Wild, yeah. So, he's a very talented director, and this is an amazing movie about Africa and human aid relief and some of the politics that go into that. And it was an amazing cast and all that. So, and then I did a few years ago a movie called 24 Hours to Live, which was a real action movie, just pure action, a lot of fun, great stunts. In fact, we loosely based one of our action sequences on the Raid 2. There's one little piece of the Raid 2 where we kind of had some fun with that. And then, then we're getting into the producing part here. So, let's see here. I'm just going to catch up with my notes. Anyway, one of the things that obviously you need to start out with is a script, because without a script, you're not a producer. So depending on your script, I think as a producer, you need to get the script right first. You can't really do much if your script isn't there. So you have to work with your director and hopefully not just scale the script down to, I think, what you want, what the money you have, but also make it accentuate the things that make it special and and be brave in what you're doing. And you need to get the script right. Now, I can't say how to do that because it's very unique to every single project. Each one of your projects is different, but you need to believe in it, and if you believe in it, then hopefully other people will believe in it. So again, don't be afraid to be bold and do something different and interesting, and something that makes sense to you, but also hopefully has a commercial appeal. Stephen and I have done a lot of pitch competitions around the world where we talk about commercial versus integrity versus, not that the two are mutually exclusive, but hopefully you can get them together. But a story that people want to see, but a story that you believe in, you know what I mean? And that's, it's kind of a hard thing to get right. So, I mean, if it were easy, of course, everyone would be doing it. And there's more and more stories out there. I mean, there's tons of stories. So, again, that's one of the things that you need to work through. And then your team, putting together your team. So, I talked a little bit about budget already, but if there are questions about this, look, every budget is as different as every script, as every project. So you're going to have to, again, cater that appetite to the resources that you have and maximizing the resources, taking advantage of grants, loans, incentives, being clever with your money. Like for instance, having a sponsor maybe give you a gift that you can give away as a raffle in a scene where you need like 100 people to show up and stay all day, and then you have a raffle, you serve lunch, which hopefully someone will provide for you, and then you have a raffle and you give away the gift at the end, and everyone has a chance to do that, and then you're not paying 100 people to sit in a room we just had that on Standing Up for Sunny in Sydney, a very small movie. It was like $1.5 million. I mean, it was very, very small, but it was about a comedian, and it had a lot of audiences. And you know, it's hard to get audiences to stay there all day so that you can film them, because it was multiple audiences, because it's stand-up comedy. So how do you do that with no money? Serve them lunch. You get a restaurant to say, yeah, we'll sponsor you, so they serve them lunch, and everyone gets a free lunch, and then they get a gift at the end, and you've now saved thousands of dollars by just, you know, being clever. So that's producing one-on-one. So your team, getting back to your team, I think. Yes, okay. Your team. The director of photography, commonly thought to be the first and most important hire on a film. But again, you have to be careful, remember who the star is. The star should be your director in film. In television, it's kind of your producer-director. But again, you know, your director of photography is going to bring a lot to the movie, or to the TV show, or to the webisode, or whatever it is. And so, you know, you should be very choosy but careful who you get. They're going to have a big influence on your movie, obviously, because they're going to be, you know, filming it. This is all kind of common sense, but it's interesting to see how your team works together. So your production designer, I think, is the other major part of your creative team, working again with the director. So you know, the production designer is going to give you everything kind of in front of the camera. So you have now your two sides, and they have to be kind of controlled and moderated by the director. Then the assistant director, of course, your assistant director is going to be running the set and keeping you on schedule, and hopefully solving problems that are happening, you know, in production, which is inevitable because, of course, there are always problems in production. One of the things that I think people underestimate, and this is something we were speaking about yesterday, is safety. And you know, your first AD is, I mean, it all comes from the top. As a producer, I think you have to stress safety. Like, I know that there are a lot of, you know, you're rushing to finish a scene or whatever it is, but if it's ever unsafe, take a second. It's really important. It's, you know, there's an old saying, we're not saving lives here. You know what I mean? It's not like it's brain surgery. It's making a movie, and it's really important, but it's not more important than safety. So I'll get back to that. We'll have some discussion. I mean, one of the anecdotes I can tell you about safety is, you know, on Mad Max, you know, Fury Road, that was a movie that had stunts and explosions and special effects every single day, 2 units going at the same time. We were serving almost 2,000 lunches every day. That's how many people were on that movie at any given time. It was massive, massive. But thankfully, no one died on that set, not even from lunch. But no one was seriously critically injured. You know, there were injuries. There's always injuries on set. You know, someone in carpentry saws their finger off and they have to get it replaced. You know, that kind of thing happens. So the accidents happen. The most common set injury, do you know what that is? You have any idea? It's cutting your hand from the bagel knife. This is true. It's absolutely true. I don't know if you have bagels on set in Indonesia, but if you do, be careful. Okay? So now safety, I'm being funny, but safety is absolutely something that we've had to get very serious about, you know, especially in the last 10 or 15 years, because stunts get bigger and bigger and people expect more and more and more. And it gets risky. It's always risky, so be careful. Please rehearse, do it smartly, take the time, make sure that if anybody sees something that doesn't look right, that they put their hand up, you know what I mean? You have to give your crew the freedom. On Mad Max, we would have a safety meeting every morning. We would go through everything that we were doing during the day. So even the production assistant that's locking up, you know, some remote thing knew what we were doing. So if they saw someone driving in that was maybe going to go into an area that would be dangerous, they knew, let's stop, you know, just in case. It's just really important. You have to stay on that. So, makeup and hair, costume design, your editor, I can't speak highly enough about editorial. Editorial is gonna, Sean Penn told me one time, he said, you write a movie 3 times. You write the script, and then you rewrite it when you direct it, and then you rewrite it again when you're in the editing room. So, it's interesting to see how a film can change if you look at the script till you look at the final edited version. And online now, you can find almost any script. You can find the script for Inception or, you know, whatever your favorite movie is, you can find the script, and it's interesting to watch the movie and then go back to the script and see how it's changed, you know, and it does. In editorial, you can change whole arcs and sequences and it, you know, and then there's the composer, which is also very, very important aspect. So I want to give you an example. There's safety first, see? Falling behind. We're going to talk a little more about Mad Max. There's your film crew, your team. Okay, so when I started at Warner Brothers, I started at this little division, which you probably never heard of, called Warner Premiere. And Warner Premiere did these in those days, DVD sequels. And one of the movies that I was asked to make was a version of Scooby-Doo. But it was a prequel of Scooby-Doo. It was how they met the dog, and you know, and what's in a Scooby snack, and you know, how did this come around? I mean, all the questions that you want to know as a Scooby-Doo fan, right? You know, so it was when they were still in high school and all that kind of stuff, and it was actually a really fun project. But the Scooby-Doo movies, the first one was made in Australia for $92 million. The second one was made in Vancouver for $112 million. Now, our little division, they gave me $7.5 million to make this movie, okay? With a CG dog. With a visual effects dog. So, I mean, like, this is impossible, right? Totally impossible. But, you know, this is an example of what I'm talking about. You know, making your budget work for whatever the project is. So, yeah, we had a lot of fun with it, but what we were able to do was, I kind of took it back to math for a second, and then figured out what we could afford. And then the writers and the director started figuring out how to use those resources to tell a good story. So it's kind of like reverse engineering, where you're kind of creating the budget first and then going back and creating the project, which, you know, sometimes you have to do. So here was the process that I took. We knew that a DVD feature costs about $4 million, give or take, in Vancouver, because they have a great rebate, which we'll get to as well. But so if you consider that that's $4 million of your $7.5 million, that leaves you $3.5 million thereabouts for things like visual effects, monsters, lightning bolts, you know, when Shaggy gets hit in the head, the little Tweety birds and things like that. So if an average visual shot costs about $7,000, $8,000, it doesn't really matter what it costs, I'm just giving you the formula. That gives us about 300 shots, right? So then you have asset builds and overhead and visual effects stuff that, you know, just kind of takes money. But in a 90-minute movie, that gives you 3 or 4 shots a minute, okay, average. So that's kind of how we had to look at building the script. It was almost from the budget and then kind of reverse engineering it. So that means that Scooby is in only about a third of the movie. So 3 or 4 shots a minute. It's 3 shots a minute. It's about a third. So the final version of the movie was only 82 minutes, and in the contract, it actually said, we had a contract with Cartoon Network, where it said it had to be 82 minutes or more. Of course, it was 82 minutes. There was no more. And that was with credits. So we had to make every single shot count. So we spaced out the scenes. On set, we used a Scooby double almost, like a man in a suit, who was a movement actor that could kind of approximate a lot of what Scooby does. And then the animators would animate over him. And that would make their job a lot easier because it was just quicker. They knew, it wasn't like starting from scratch. They had a reference. So little tricks like that can really help your visual effects. But talk to your visual effects supervisor or your company about how you can help them help themselves. You know, of course, you do the regular things like combining locations and moves. You shoot multiple sets simultaneously. Take advantage of rebates, which we did. And at the end of the day, one of the ideas that I had was, you know how in Scooby-Doo they always have, like, Scooby and Shaggy get locked in a closet or in a safe or in somewhere, and it's dark, and they're just the eyes? That's a cheap visual effects shot. So, you know, you can't do it the whole movie, but, you know, little scenes, and then, you know, so anyway. So, you know, look, that's an example of what I'm talking about, but you're still doing that when you get to $100 million movies. You know what I mean? A form of that. You have more choices. You have more availability of resources and money. Money doesn't always solve problems. In fact, sometimes it creates problems because you have too many choices. So you end up preparing more things. People ask me all the time, isn't it easier to produce a bigger budget movie than a smaller budget movie? Not really, you know, because the bigger budget movie, like I said, you have money to have lots of choices, and then it's like decisions, and you know, it's all that. Whereas on a smaller movie, the answer is simple. It's no. It's much easier. So anyway. But look, anything's possible. Like, I'm talking about millions of dollars, but you know what? Roger Corman started making movies for, what he would do is he would get a contract to make a movie, and he would get, I don't know what it was, like probably $10 million or $5 million, not even, like $3 million. And then he would shoot the movie in less days, and then he would take the remainder and shoot another movie in 3 or 4 days on the same sets with sometimes different actors or whatever it was. And that's how he started his business. I wouldn't say it's, he had a contract to do the movie, so he delivered the movie, and then he took basically what was going to be his profit and made another movie. And then out of that created a whole business. So, you know, some of the movies, when I was with Roger Corman, I was doing, at any given time, I was doing 3 movies at the same time. One was the big movie, which was like Carnosaur. I don't know if you ever saw Carnosaur, but the tagline on Carnosaur was, it came out just before Jurassic Park, the first Jurassic Park. So he made the movie, edited it, put it together, and released it right before Jurassic Park, because everyone was waiting for Jurassic Park, and all of a sudden there's Carnosaur, and you're like, huh? And the tagline was, "Driven to extinction, back for revenge." So great. Like, that's marketing, right? You know, and that, by the way, I can't speak to marketing, maybe you can, but I mean, that's a big part of your film too, is figuring out what that tagline is for your audience. So, anyway, yeah, Carnosaur. You know, so some of these movies, that was the big movie that I was doing, and then I was doing another movie, which was on the same sets, but at night. Yeah. So during the day, from like 7 a.m. until 7 p.m., we would be shooting the big movie, and then from 7 p.m., this other crew would come in and shoot at night on the same sets. But it was a different script, different cast, you know, and most of us were different crew. I, of course, had to do both. So I would go to my office and take a nap and then come back. And sometimes people wouldn't show up, so I would do their jobs. Because that's what you do as a producer, you know? And like if the dolly grip doesn't come, you push dolly for the night, you know? So, yeah, I learned a lot on that job. Anyway, so, yeah, I mean, what can I tell you? I can't teach you to be, you know, a producer or a director or a writer or any of those things. I think you have to learn it yourself. But one thing I would like to impress upon you is not to hold yourself back. You know, not to deny an opportunity for you to succeed. Even now, as a producer with a lot of experience and 60 some odd movies under my belt as either a producer or a production executive or a production manager, there's still things that I don't know. Of course, I'm learning stuff on every movie, and if I said no to everything that came across my desk, I probably wouldn't do anything, you know, just because I didn't know it, you know. And many times in my career, without being irresponsible, many times in my career, well, a little bit irresponsible, I've said yes to projects that I wasn't sure I could actually pull off. You know what I'm saying? But it's taking those risks and having the confidence and having just being inspired and excited enough and leaning on your friends. You know, if you know someone who's already done this or who has experience or they know someone, don't be afraid to call them. You know, one of the things in this industry that you've probably already experienced is generally it's a community, you know, and we lean on each other. And if you help this person and they help you, so call on your senior colleagues, call on people that have experience, call on people that have maybe made a movie in a different place or done something that you haven't done and get their advice. It's something I do all the time, and you know, it hopefully will help you feel more confident about taking those crazy opportunities and doing it. So if you feel like it, we can open it up for questions from you, questions from the audience. I've got a lot of anecdotes which I can share from some of these movies, and I'm talking and I'm not. See, there's Scooby-Doo. We'll go through the slide list. It's like a slideshow when there were slides, which don't exist anymore. But anyway, it was really fun. These were young actors. Robbie Amell, who's right in the middle there, on the left. So we decided that Fred didn't have white hair back in those days. I don't know, it's just one of those things that we decided. But anyway, you've seen him a lot. He's on a lot of television and movies and stuff. But Scooby was, the voice of Scooby was actually Scooby. We found a guy named Fred, what was his name, Fred something. Really cool, that was a lot of fun. And I'm very proud of the project because we took a $92 million movie and made a pretty good version of it for $7.5 million. And the studio was totally impressed. They were just like, wow. So, you never know. That's a cameraman. I have no idea why that's in there, but that looks cool. That's me, yes. Yeah. No. Okay, so filmmaking, co-production, always good. I don't know if Indonesia has co-production treaties. I hope they do, because those are great ways of maximizing. No? Okay, hopefully someday co-production treaties. But even so, you can get onto co-productions that take international crews. It's a great way of maximizing rebates and you know, bringing in revenue from distribution and things like that. So you hear about a lot of Chinese co-productions these days because they seem to work quite well. So we'll talk about The Great Gatsby. That was an amazing experience for me, working with not just Leonardo DiCaprio, which I didn't really, you know, he's a very private guy, but he's an amazing actor, and just the sets and the extras and it was awesome. So there he is. Love that shot. And in fact, I want to say, when I read the script and read the description of this scene, that's when I knew this movie was going to be it's just going to work. Because that, to this day, actually gives me goosebumps. That scene, I think, makes the rest of the movie work. So think about that, well, not this scene in particular, but think about that kind of like pop when you're looking at your movie, and you know, that's just one of the seminal moments, so I love it. This was an amazing experience. I actually didn't really do anything on this movie other than sit there and go. I mean, wide-eyed, my mouth was open, I'm just like, you know, flies going in, the whole thing. It was crazy. It was so awesome to see, because this entire crew and director and everybody had already done 3 years of shooting Lord of the Rings. Now they had a couple of years to prep this movie. So talk about knowing your stuff. And again, with a lot of money, and they had a lot of money, but they also had a lot to do, you know? And they were so on the nose all day long, every day, all the time. It was amazing. This was a very different experience. You know, we shot most of it in Namibia, in Africa, and we were driving, you know, 60 Ks out to very, very remote areas where you couldn't see not a sign of life anywhere. It was just unbelievable. And we had these big, it was almost like a military operation where we had these big tents, and we were serving all these lunches, and everybody, you know, dressed up in Mad Max gear, and it was crazy. It was an amazing movie. Gods of Egypt, I supervised production on the Gods of Egypt for Lionsgate, and that was with the director Alex Proyas, who's done, you know, some amazing movies himself. Another very big movie with lots of visual effects. This was, ironically, also takes place in a lot of desert scenes, because it's supposed to be Egypt, but the entire movie was made on soundstage, as opposed to Mad Max, which was made all on location. So a lot of the same things, but in a completely different environment. You know, visual effects and desert scenes and everything else. But yeah, it was an incredible experience. And then, I don't know if you know, this is really not a highlight of my resume, but I had a lot of fun doing Step Up All In. There's now a Step Up series, believe it or not. But this is the third movie that I shot in 3D, in actual 3D. So with 2 cameras, you know, doing the 3D. The first one was The Great Gatsby. The second one was The Hobbit, and then this one. And it was really interesting when you shoot a movie in 3D. You have to do a lot of things very differently, and things take a lot more time to move the camera, to figure out the shots, to choreograph, especially with dance. Very, very interesting project, and a lot of fun. And then, of course, at Lionsgate, I also supervised the last 2 Hunger Games movies, which were amazing. I mean, again, I had a crew that knew exactly what they were doing, a director who was completely just so talented and so good at his job. He knew how to really pull things together and make the shots as spectacular as the entire movie is spectacular, both of them. And then The Last Face, which we talked about, and we shot all over Africa, South Africa for that. And we were doubling Sudan, Geneva, Cape Town, so that wasn't too much of a stretch, and Sierra Leone and Liberia. And then 24 Hours to Live, which we talked about. that was a lot of fun, and total action, you know, crazy. And then the last movie I just did last year was called Action Point. And just to show you I have a sense of humor, it was with Johnny Knoxville. I don't know if you know Johnny Knoxville from Jackass, but yeah, this one was really, really tough because I had the main actor who's in stunts all the time. And if he gets hurt, we have to stop shooting. And if you stop shooting, that's very expensive, very bad, very bad. So at the end of the day, I had to figure out his stunts and put them at the end of each week so that he had the weekend to recover. We knocked him out 5 times, like out cold. I mean, I didn't want to, but he wanted to. He wasn't satisfied unless he really got hurt, which was tough. I mean, one little anecdote. There's a scene in the movie where he's spraying bear repellent to get rid of this bear. And of course the nozzle is backwards and he sprays it in his own face. And so the prop guys come up with a can of bear repellent, you know, Acme bear repellent, whatever it is, and it's got saline in it, of course, right? You know, like you would do in a movie. Not too. Johnny says, no, I want the real thing. I want mace. And I'm like, but Johnny, I can't do that. We're going to shoot this at 10 o'clock in the morning, and then you're going to have puffy eyes and red face and everything for like 24 hours. I won't be able to shoot with you. And he says, it wouldn't be fair to the fans. They expect it. And I'm like, how do I argue with that? I mean, I argued with it, of course, but still, I lost that battle. So he sprayed himself in the face with mace. Himself. He didn't have, like, how do you do that? Yeah, that's Johnny Knoxville. Anyway, so that's it for that kind of stuff, but let's open it up to, why don't you start, Stephen?
Yeah, look, you've traversed, you know, you dipped in and out of an amazing career, and so it's a little difficult to know where to start, but I thought maybe we should just learn a little bit about you guys so that we can maybe come up with some questions that are relevant to you. How many people are producers in the room? Can we do a show of hands? Okay. Directors? Or as John would say, yes, I am a director.
Yeah.
Writers? Wow, lots of writers.
Great.
Good for you. Any other craft or skill? What do you do?
Music composer.
Oh,
Yeah,
great.
very important.
Yep. Anyone else?
Concept art.
Concept art.
Concept artist. Very good. Yeah. Okay. And how many of you have worked on short films? Hands up. Short films. How many have worked on feature films? Many of you.
Wow, that's great.
How many of you have worked on television? Many of you. How many of you have worked on, let's call it digital media, so content for online? Wow. Okay, so quite experienced. Great experience. Yeah. All right, so, you know, one of the things I thought might be a good place to start was, you know, you started to talk a little bit about, you know, making your budget work for your project. And I guess I've heard that you guys are working on projects that are, well, I mean, from very, very small budgets up into the biggest budgets, 3 million US, 5. So who's worked on a budget that is, say, more than $2 million US? Anyone? Okay, so maybe you got paid. That's a good thing. I saw you, Shanti. Okay. So, you know, when you're given a script, and it's an independent film, let's say, you know, one of Sean Penn's scripts, and you look at it, and you see that, you know, the vision for the film and possibly the vision of the director is far exceeds, you know, what you think you're going to be able to do for the budget. What is the first thing that you do, or the first thing that you say to that director?
Well, that's not unlike the Scooby-Doo model. I break it down into pieces. So the biggest piece of, I think, a film is the day cost. Okay, so how much it costs to shoot a day. That's a formula that you can kind of figure out. You know that you need, you know, this many people, and you've got, you know, a location, and you've got to serve lunch, and you've got, you know, there are certain costs. It's kind of like the cost of doing business. It's a pretty simple formula. So if you know how much a day costs, you know, you've got equipment, and you've got people's salaries, and you've got, you know, all of those things. So if you know how much a day costs, then you take the script and you break it down into how many days you think it will take to shoot the movie. And this is the most simple way of answering the question. There are obviously a lot of nuances like visual effects and dance numbers and rehearsals and other things that go outside of the cost of the day cost. But ultimately, if you break it down into quantifiable pieces, building blocks, you can then say, okay, well, I've broken down this script, and I have to be honest with you, I think we can shoot, I'm making this up, maybe 5 pages per day, which is, you know, that's working. That's you know, that's a scene or 2 or 3 sometimes in a day. And if it has action, that's a big day, you know. So let's just say I think we can average about 5 pages a day. Well, the script that he gave me was 120 pages. I'm making this up. Actually, it was 140 pages. But anyway, 120 pages. So divided by 5, that's, how many days is that? 60 days? No, it's, wait, it's 30 days? 24?
How many days? How many days is that? You don't need to be a mathematician, obviously.
30? Does anyone have an iPhone that they can just...
25. 25.
30? I think it's, I'm putting 30. 24. The writer. The writer got it. You should be a production manager. So, so 24 days. Now, you know that it costs, and again, I'll just make this up. Let's say it costs ₹1 million a day to shoot. Well, that's 24 million right there, but you only have 20, so, you know, that's where you have to. Now, it's not only about taking up pages. Sometimes it's like, well, we need more money. Or sometimes it's, well, we're spending a lot of money on this, maybe we should spend it on a few more days. Or figuring out how to make more of a location where you can double up on something or whatever. So that's where you can get into it. But I guess at the end of the day, it's about how many days. It also, you know, there are a million other things. Like I said, there are visual effects. There's, okay, in this scene, it's snowing. Okay, well that means I have to have a whole special effects crew coming out and putting snow down, or putting snow down, you know, the set dressing, or whatever it is. So by removing those things or changing those things into things that don't cost as much money, that's how you can hopefully afford the director's vision. The problem is with someone like Sean Penn, who is not used to hearing no, you know, that's where, I mean, Sean would say things to me like, I would say, Sean, you know, I think maybe you've done enough takes on this scene. We need to move on because we need to get to that. And he would look at me. This is so frustrating. He would look at me and say things like, you know, John, you only get one chance to make a movie, and you better make it the best it can be. And I'd just be like, oh. All right, keep going, I'll figure it out. I mean, that's what you have to do as a producer. You have to challenge, and sometimes it's just reminding the director, we need to move up. By 2 o'clock, we were supposed to be on this next scene, and we're not on that next scene. So, you know, we're going to have to sacrifice something.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if it was you who was telling me this, but someone in your position who said it's always a negotiation. So if you say, well, if you really want this, then you're going to have to give me something, later down the track. What are you willing to give up?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I position myself, and this is how I think I've gotten along with some very difficult directors. It's not about, like, what are you going to give me? You know what I mean? Because it's their movie. It's like, this might be bad for your movie, you know what I mean? Or this might be better for your movie. To be a part of their process of making the movie, I think, is a helpful position for a producer working with a director. Ultimately, hopefully, you want to be partners. You want to be both invested in it, and you're both working for the movie. You know what I mean? That's kind of the goal. It doesn't always work out that way. Some directors are very, antagonistic and difficult, but you never know.
This producer-director relationships are a really interesting one, isn't it? And I guess, from the sound of your filmography, it sounds like for the bigger films, if the rights are owned by the studio, then producer has a little bit more power.
Not really.
They can call the shots at some point.
No one says no to Peter Jackson.
Right.
Steven Spielberg, there's no in that. Jim Cameron. I mean, I haven't worked with those guys, Peter Jackson. But it's like those are auteurs. Those people have final say, even over the studio, even if it's the studio's money, because ultimately the studio is counting on them to deliver the next blockbuster that's going to make them $1 billion or whatever it is. So they're the star in a way.
So, I mean, do we have a microphone in the audience? Because I'm really curious as to if someone could describe the producer-director relationship here in general in Indonesia.
On independent films, it's obviously very different. I mean, the director is much more eager just for the opportunity to get their movie made. So I think they're a bit more humble and a bit more reasonable. But when you've had success like Alex Proyas or like Baz Luhrmann, I mean, the studio may say, we're done, you know what I mean? And the director will say, no, we're not. And here's Leo, if you want to talk about it, you know what I mean? That's what they do. Like, you want to say no? Say no to Leo. Okay, it's fine. Go ahead. Leverage.
Right. Does anyone want to offer up an idea of how that works here, or whether it's been evolving or changing?
Or just your experience.
Yeah. It's certainly true that in Hollywood over the different decades, the power position between director and producer has shifted backwards and forwards.
It's also different in different media. So for instance, in features, they tend to be more director-driven. In television, it tends to be more producer-writer-driven, because directors kind of come in and out, but producer-writers ultimately, are the guiding light, of the project. And what's interesting is, and I think we talked about this yesterday, I'm sensing a change in producers, because 5-10 years ago, I'm a feature guy. I only do features. I don't do television. I don't do series. I don't even know how. And people would never hire me I thought, oh, it'd be nice to do a pilot or something, But I would never get that job. The thing is, now I'm being brought in for meetings at studios and television companies, because features and television are really kind of becoming, television is becoming long form, almost like 6-hour movies, you know what I mean? And you're getting 6 or 8 episodes out of it. And it's really interesting, because so many of the jobs that I'm going up for now are actually these, long-form television series, because they're being done much more like features. And the production executive at Warner Brothers told me, she said, we're actually looking more to feature producers because the process is more similar now than it is to television. It's more similar to features. So you're finding different changes in the environment. But yeah, it's.
Well, look, you guys, if you have any questions on this subject, or if you want to take it in a particular direction, please.
And I've got lots of stories. If you want to hear more stories, they're fun.
Yeah? Why don't you have a little think about it? Okay.
I'll break the ice.
Okay.
Hey, John, I spoke to you.
I'm looking forward. Yes,
Yes.
I'm looking forward to you being up here soon.
Yes, so perhaps maybe I could say on behalf of everyone here, I think mostly if we have producers here, we are independent producers, am I correct?
Yes.
Is there any other kind?
Which means we only do, I think most of us have companies and we only do maybe one film a year if we're lucky, I think, right? And of course there are big ones that would produce 10 to 24 films per year.
Yeah.
So our relationship with the directors and the crew are very specific.
Yeah.
I think most of the independent producers would work very closely with the director and the writer at the beginning, and then pick the set of skills or the crew together, mostly. But we do have limited numbers of great director of photography or even writers, so it is getting difficult these days. Perhaps we will talk about that
Yeah.
later on this afternoon.
Yeah.
But perhaps I have a question. What do you do, or if you have come across an experience where somehow in the middle of the shoot you have problems with your director or your other crew, or your DP is going against your director and so on. How do you usually there in the States tackle this problem?
Yeah.
I guess it will be different if it's a studio, but if it's, if you work independently, how
Yeah.
would you do it?
Well, first of all, I don't even live in the States anymore. I live in Australia, and I primarily work outside of the States. So, but I have worked a lot in the States. I've worked all over the world, so I would take this into the world stage. What you describe is pretty much the job of the producer in production every day. I mean, there's always conflict of some sort, whether it's with the owner of the location or you know what I'm saying, like every day. Or it's one of the crew members, or, like people are working hard, they're putting their heart and soul into it, and eventually someone's gonna get, upset. It's just a matter of time. And, sometimes the director has a different vision, or they change their mind, which is common. I mean, this happens every day, it's all the time. So I like to say 90% of my job as a producer is done before we start shooting. So it's putting together the budget, the plan, the schedule, hiring the crew, very, very important. I touched on it a little bit, but each crew member is a potential, great thing or a potential problem. So you have to really take it into account. And sometimes you have limited choices. And to your point, I would say, if you can't find the director of photography that you really want, online, everybody's director of photography reel is online. So you can, I don't want to say you can get anyone in the world, but open up, the possibility to someone from somewhere else. You know what I mean? There's a lot of talent, even in Southeast Asia, where there are really, really good photographers, and you'd be surprised at what people would do and how you just ask. Don't be afraid to ask. It can only be a compliment to them, even if they say no. Okay, so don't be afraid to step up and do whatever it takes to make your movie great. But in answer to your question, look, conflict is so I was saying 90% of producing is done before you start. The other 10% is solving the problems and putting out the fires and averting disaster during production. It's a lot of changing the plan because this happened or that happened or, you know, whatever. It really depends on the situation. I think, like I said before, one of the things that I try to do is I put myself in the position of what is my job at the end of the day? Is to help make a great movie. So your team is the movie. It's not about you. It's not about I require. You know, it's about what's best for the movie. And if you take, I think, that stance, then the director can't really argue with you because they want to make a great movie. I mean, they'll still argue, but you know, they're always going to argue. But you know what I'm saying? If you're on the same team, then you're trying. Let's figure this out together. You know what I'm saying? You might have, you said, a director of photography that, you know, and believe me, this happens all the time, where they've split with the director and they see this scene going this way and the director sees it going this way. Well, that's, you know, kind of part being a therapist and working with them to say, all right, where can we find common ground and how do we resolve the differences? And sometimes, you know, the director, I would say, and again, it depends on the situation and the person, but the director sees it one way, and ultimately, the job of the director of photography is to realize the director's vision. But the director of photography oftentimes has shot 10 times as many movies as the director has directed. So sometimes the director needs to take that into account. You know, if this is a first-time director, they may not have the experience to make a decision on this. So I think it's just pulling logic and reasoning and trying to, you know, soften the feathers and keep everybody calm. Maybe it's taking them out of the situation. I had one situation where the director of photography was just going out of his mind, and the director was driving him crazy, and he was doing things that he didn't want to do, and all this kind of stuff. No, you don't know. No, it was a long time ago on a movie that I'm sure no one in this room has ever seen, and I hope they don't. But anyway, not because of this. So anyway, I took them both. We were shooting on a sound stage, and it was a sound stage that did not have air conditioning, and we happened to be it was a very hot day. It was a 40-degree day, and the lights, and we were on the stage. It was hot, and so I took them outside, and we went into the shade, and I brought them together because at this point they weren't even talking. You know, the AD was like, "Where do you want the camera? Okay, put the camera here. Where do you want?" You know, it's almost translating from the two. It was that bad. And so I brought them outside because they knew. Because at a certain point they know that they have to, you know, continue. So brought them outside into a different environment. I had them set up a different shot or something to give us some time. And then I brought them outside and I said, "Look, guys, let's figure this out," you know. And I think that's where, you know, the producer is therapist, is mom, is dad, is, you know, all of those things. Hopefully you tell a joke, you know, like, guys, come on, you know, and just try to work it out. But again, come from the point of, you know, the movie is the team that we're on, and I'm trying to help that team make the best movie possible. And I think that's always kind of a good way to start. You know, so
I'm curious, you know, I mean, you've got a full day, everyone's always tired. When do you choose these moments? If you've got a major conflict, you said it's good to change the location and take them out of that space, but when?
Well, think about it. If you can take a half an hour and waste a half an hour to solve the problem, that's more valuable than continuing on in a really bad way that is time-consuming and not productive. And look, the actors are very sensitive. Everyone's very sensitive. The crew is sensitive. Everybody knows that there's conflict. Even if it's not screaming at each other, they can tell. And so everybody's job, I think, goes down. And I think it's more important to waste a half an hour of shooting to resolve the problem rather than continue on that way for the rest of the day, or the week, or the movie. So, yeah, I mean, you have to get on those things, and sometimes you have to let them play out a little bit. You just have to use your best judgment, but I think part of being a good producer is being a good psychologist.
I have two more questions, but I'll hold it. Maybe somebody else would like to ask a question.
Yes,
Thank you, John.
you're welcome. Thank you. That's a good, very good question.
Hello, John and Stephen. I'm just curious about the 90% of the process before actually shoot the movie. What is the best approach when you translate a really good script into a budgeting? Because that sometimes can be very tricky.
Yeah.
And especially here in Indonesia, the industry is growing, and there are some scripts that are really has not been done yet.
Yeah.
So you have to use your imagination.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm just curious, what is the best approach to actually realize a really good script? I'll say it's a good script because well, it's very subjective, but yeah, just
No, you're absolutely right. But scripts, movies in general, stories are subjective, and I think that if you believe in it, then it's worth pursuing, and that's kind of how I started. And look, at the core of it, a script is a story, and it's artistic, and it's all of those things. And part of the job of a good producer, or really a line producer, but many times, especially on smaller movies, you're the producer, you're the line producer, you're the accountant, you're the post-production supervisor. Sometimes you're the dolly grip. Sometimes you're, you know what I mean? Like, you're the caterer, and the psychiatrist, and the, you know. So you've got story and art on one side, and then you've got numbers and business on the other side. And I think at the core, you know, again, I talk about at the core of producing, but this is probably the talent of a producer, is being able to translate those two languages into something that works for both. I often say, I was interviewed for a publication the other day, and I was talking about you know, in essence, I'm translating. You know, I'm translating the director's vision between the director's vision and the studio's expectations. Because, of course, the studio wants a good movie, but they want it to be for a price. You know, it has to be this, it has to have all these things. So it's all very quantitative. So I'm not saying it's very easy to do. With regard to your question about script and things that have never been done before, or how do you do that? I mean, look, I do that on every movie. There's always one scene, or maybe more than one, or a sequence, or a technology that I've never done before, and I don't know it. Maybe it's never been done on any movie before, you know what I mean? But again, it's like that question, John, what do you do? Are you a lawyer? No, I'm a producer. You know, it's like, you have to be able to make that leap without being totally reckless and irresponsible. I don't want to suggest that you be irresponsible, but I do want you to, I want to suggest that you be cautiously irresponsible. You know what I mean? Like, you want to be able to make an educated guess. And if it's not right, you'll figure it out. Have that confidence in figuring it out. If in your situation you've got the script and you want to make sure that it's absolutely right, this budget, whatever it is, but you want to make it the best it can be. But at the end of the day, it's only going to be a best guess, because every budget is a best guess, no matter what anyone says. Things change, you know? Try and get as much information as you can, and try to do the best you can to budget accurately. But at the end of the day, things change. It'll always be a little bit of, this is my best guess. So don't be afraid of that, because even at at the highest level of the biggest studio budget, there's still a little bit of speculation. I can't say that this visual effects shot is going to cost $5 million. You know what I mean? Like I'm being crazy, but $5 million. But also, I can't say that it's going to. We know that the budget can only be, so much, so you have to fit it in there. You have to have confidence in your ability to solve the problems on the day. So the 90% is doing the research, asking experts, doing everything you can to make it as accurate as possible, and the 10% is fixing the problems that you made in the 90%. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay. That's not, I just want you to have confidence. I can't say that I can fix your problem.
Have you been handed scripts where it's been acknowledged that the script is not ready, or it could be developed a lot further, and you're being asked, well, we want to go ahead and shoot. What is your response to that type of situation?
So there are certain no-goes. One of them is safety, as we mentioned before. If for some reason they want to shoot, but they haven't figured out how they're going to shoot something that could potentially be dangerous or harmful to someone, then it's like, no, don't do it. I'd love to do it with you, but I'm not going to do that. So if you need to find someone else, find someone else, because you don't want that on your hands at all. And hopefully you can encourage them not to do it because it's not safe. But to answer your question about like if it's not ready, look, I think you have to. I mean, I'm at a place in my career where I have enough experience, hopefully, to be able to make a decision, a gut call, and say, I think we can pull this off. I think with everybody involved and what we have, I think we can probably make this work. But if I think it's impossible and it's going to be a failure, I might say, look, I think we should spend a little money and do a little more research, or rehearse, or maybe do a proof of concept. Maybe there's a halfway medium where it doesn't slow us down, but we take a minute to do a test, and that gives us enough information and experience to say, I think this can work or this won't. In terms of story, if the story isn't resolved, I mean, it's not really my job to say, in the third act, when the guy goes to the girlfriend's house and he doesn't like, it's not my job. That's really the director and creative producer or writer. And those things have happened, and we shot it and it didn't work, and you never know. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, does that answer the question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It's not your job.
No, it's not my job. Learn that one. That's not my job.
That's good. It's good to know what isn't your job, right?
But also, I think as a good producer, you take responsibility for, like, if the catering is terrible, I could say that's not my job. But it is my job to provide good catering to the crew, because as a producer, that's what you have to do. So I wouldn't shirk responsibility, but at the same time, if it is a purely creative thing, unless I'm the creative producer, which I'm not really, that's not my job. I mean, I'm not saying if it's easy, I'm saying that's really not my job. But those are tricky things, and it is very subjective. To your point, you never know. This is my opinion, but I don't think this works. But I've been wrong about that too. And that's sometimes what makes the films great, is when they do the unexpected, when you do the thing that doesn't make sense. When there was one director, that 24 Hours to Live, the Ethan Hawke movie. That's a movie that is a straight-ahead action movie. It's a lot of fun. It's very entertaining. Big stunts. We had a lot of fun making the movie. But that was a director whose job it is, or has been. He's a big second unit director on huge movies. He does like all the X-Men movies, and he did Steven Spielberg movies. He does these action sequences that are really, really logical. It's point A to point B to point C to point D to point E. And my frustration with him, creatively was that he was too logical. That as a director, I think sometimes you need to mislead the audience or do something unexpected. And even Ethan Hawke would say, like, why would I do, like, this is what the audience expects me to do, but maybe I would do this, and it makes it more interesting. But this director said, no, but that doesn't make sense. Like, in that moment, you wouldn't do that. Okay, well, you know, so we made that movie. And it's very logical, it's very entertaining, but you kind of go out, you get out of it and you go like, oh, well, that was good. But it wasn't like, wow, that was great, you know, because it did something really unexpected. It was very entertaining and all that stuff. So a lot of times, you know, I will try to encourage a director to do something different. And so when the director does something different or the writer does something different in the script, maybe it's a good idea.
Great. How are we going for time, Edwin? We've got time for a couple more questions.
Yes.
Good, good. Okay, folks. We've got time for both, so.
Good morning, John.
Good morning.
Hi. So, more often than not, when directors work, they tend to work with the same bunch of collaborators, like movie after movie, like Spielberg, Scorsese, they're working with the same kind of crew.
Clint Eastwood.
Clint Eastwood, yeah.
Right, yeah.
And what happens is that, you know, because they've developed the same visual language, working together, and
Yeah.
so they kind of pick the lowest hanging fruit. Okay, I just work with the same guys over and over again. But what that can happen is that it kind of forms this little tightly knit big boys club, right? And that may or may not end up leading to a certain stagnation and just everything just kind of revolves around this small group of people.
Yeah.
So how important is it to you to inject fresh new blood in the production process? And how crucial is it to you? Is that something you think about as a producer?
It's a great question. It is a danger when you have the same people working together. It can go two ways. One way is it can be very, very efficient because everybody knows the other person. You know what I mean? They know what to expect from them. They know the director. They know what they like, what they don't like. So there's a shorthand. Things become very efficient, and that can be a great thing. It can also be very stagnating, as you say, when you work with the same person and you come to expect it, and then you're not stretching yourself. There's no new ideas and those kinds of things. I think, and it's very attractive to work with the people that you know, of course, because you know them. It's like the devil you know. So sometimes a good producer will, and this has happened a number of times on many movies, will say, hey, you know that last movie you did, it was really good, but I kind of thought you could do better in the production design department, maybe. You know what I mean? And, oh, well, I've worked as this production designer on so many movies and these, you know, whatever. And a good producer will convince the director that it's better for their career and the next movie, because again, it's about the next movie, that it might be better to work with someone new.
I just see you try that with Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, you're not going to do that with Clint Eastwood. I mean, people that have already made it, it's not going to happen. But yeah, I mean, we on that 24 Hours to Live movie, that's an example where we had a second unit director that was making his feature debut. He's a great guy, he's super talented, and he made a great movie, don't get me wrong. But one of the things that my boss, the producer of the movie, the financier producer, said is, look, we want this to be different than a second unit, you know, sequence. We want you to have people that are used to doing the first unit job. And so you're going to have a different crew around you because they will help translate and support you and bring you to that first unit. So I don't know if I've answered your question. I mean, that's something that, again, a good producer who's thinking outside of the box and looking at the movie and saying what's best for the movie and making that decision based on that. You know what I'm saying? But there's nothing wrong with working with the same people because, again, you can count on them and they have a vested interest in helping you make your movie. So it's a hard question to answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a question over here.
Hello, John. My name is Kevin. I want to ask you something, continuing from that questions, I was trying to elaborate more. So, the key components to make good movies from the script, right? So, I have a question that how do you do the research? So, do you do market research for the local audiences? What is the sentiment? And also the potential target audience who want to watch the movie? Because I think in Indonesia, it seems like we hardly to get that data to get. So it's very important that if we get the script, how do we know is it marketable or not? How to translate it to sales projection? And then we know that from the financial waterfall, from the theatrical release go to the distributor and production company, if we make money or we're gonna lose the money. So I know that the distribution side, they have their P&A budget for that. But in Indonesia, we don't have marketing budget for that. So maybe, I don't know if you compensated for another windows for like OTT platform, DVDs, or broadcast or webcast. Thank you.
It's a great question. I wish I could answer it. If I knew what makes a successful movie, I would have my own island with my own theater. No, I mean, like, who knows? You know, at the end of the day, I think you have to believe in your film and your vision. If it appeals to you and you think it might appeal to not everyone, but some other people, if it's different, if it's unique, it's got a voice, if it's timely, if it's powerful because it's a message that needs to get out there, if it's just funny, if it's just entertaining, whatever reason you believe that it can find its audience, then you should pursue it. As for all of the distribution and everything else, it's really important, obviously, to the movie, but it's not the area of the movie business that I really do very much work in. You know, I hear about it, I know about it, I read the trades and the articles about things, and you get a sense of that kind of stuff. I think it is difficult in Indonesia because there's not a lot of, it's an emerging market, but I also think it's more interesting in a place like Indonesia because who knows, you know what I mean? You might just hit that next, that next nerve that makes everybody go, this is fantastic, you know? And so it's exciting, and I think you can take more risks in an environment like this because there's potential for huge success. So it's a hard question for me to answer because I really don't know, but I would say don't limit yourself just by the numbers. I mean, of course, it's a business, so you have to take into account the numbers, but try to get as much money as you can, be as creative as you can in getting the money, and still within the law. And then, but I mean, look, here's a great, I love this anecdote. So, Robert Rodriguez, as you know, he did El Mariachi for $7,000 US. He won Sundance, he went on to have an amazing career. And whether you like his movies or not, I think they're always fun and interesting. And he's got an interesting voice as a director. But his first movie, El Mariachi, which he made for $7,000 US, he financed the large part of that movie by doing scientific trials, like pharmaceutical trials and giving blood and whatever he could do. I mean, like, talk about giving blood for your movie. He really did. Like, that's how he financed his movie. Now, it's that kind of commitment.
It's now got two heads after all those experiments, but that's fine.
But I mean, my point is, like, you really have to be committed to it. and you got to go for it. And you have to be a little bit, you know, kind of crazy to do it, but you got to be 100% behind it. You know. So.
Another observation to answer your question, if I may, you know, in a way, as an industry, we have a responsibility to educate our audiences and to provide them with a full smorgasbord of tasty movies that they can choose from. And if we don't, if we just give them, you know, white sliced bread, then, you know, there's more chance that they might get bored of the cinema. So I think you know, the movie industry worldwide is conscious of that. And if you look at a major market like China, what they're discovering is that there are places for niche movies. I mean, you know, the Indian movie Dangal, it made over $100 million in China. I still can't work it out. What that says is that if you have a good story that with universal themes, it could, if you do it well, find an audience. So I guess the underlying point is trust in your vision. You cannot ever anticipate when you start out on a project what the audience is going to be wanting and if there's a particular trend or anything like that by the time it's released.
Totally right. And please don't think that, you know, we're sitting here because we know. Nobody knows. We're all in it together, you know, so the best we can do is make the best movie you can, believe in it, work hard, get other people to believe in it, convince them that it's a good idea, and go for it.
How are we doing for time? There's a question. Good.
Hi John, I'm Sonny.
Hello.
Well, first I want to thank you for letting us know that either in Hollywood or in Indonesia, all the producers have the same shit, actually.
Yes, that's exactly right. That if I can teach you anything, it's that we're all the same.
But I want to ask something. I mean, like, it's maybe something personal for most of the producers. I mean, like, all the people that watch your great movie, they will talk about the star and the directors, but the viewers never ask, oh, who's the producer? Like, no. And how do you feel about it? I mean, like, nobody asks, like, oh, that's John Cooper, like, no.
He's a therapist. This is something I'm trying to change. No, look, as a producer, I think it's a certain kind of person. And look, I think all producers are a little bit different, just like people. So I always saw myself, and I like being kind of that person, just slightly off to the side. You know, other than doing these kinds of things, which I just find fun because I love traveling and I love, you know, working with Steven, and I'm very passionate about what I do, as I hope you can tell. So I love transferring that passion and sharing that passion and getting feedback, you know, from people like you and professionals like you. So, but I would say that for the kind of producer that I am, I'm happy being just off stage while the director is getting, you know, whatever award that they're getting, hopefully. And that's fine with me. And you know what? The director is really, to me, the star. I mean, the director, someone asked me yesterday, like, have you ever thought about directing? Is that something you want to do? No way. No way. For me, it's the hardest job. It's the hardest job on the set. I mean, it's because you're doing you know, you really are kind of doing a little bit of everything. You're making decisions, and everybody's counting on you. So you know, it is. I almost have empathy for the director, and I think that's why I think I'm a pretty good producer, is because I try to understand what the director is going through. And because of that, I have no interest in doing that job. But that being said, I mean, there are some producers that are way out in front of it. You know, you look at like someone like Lawrence Bender, for instance, who is a very successful producer. He produced all of Quentin Tarantino's movies and Robert Rodriguez and all these guys. And he's still an incredibly dynamic producer, and he's out there. But he's someone that kind of gets out there and does interviews and is a little bit more public than most producers. But I guess to your point, I don't have a problem with it at all. And it's funny when people ask, what kind of movies do you go and see? I go and see directors that I like. I don't go and see a genre necessarily. I don't go and see an actor. I go to see a director. You know what I mean? Because that's really kind of or sometimes a writer, because that's the author. You know what I'm saying? When I read a book, I don't just go to the science fictions. I read books of writers that I like or that I think I might like. You know what I'm saying? So I look for the author, and the author really is the director. So I hope that helps answer the question.
Other questions?
So if someone asks you, are you a producer? You say, I mean, unless you're a director or a writer, you say yes. So just don't be afraid to say yes. I think your career, without being too irresponsible, and I think that's a line that I think is it changes as you get more experience and you get older. But I can tell you this. There are things that I would have done in the beginning of my career that I can't do now. And that's because I actually know that it's impossible. But when I didn't know it was impossible, I could do it. Does that make sense? So don't be afraid of the unknown. I mean, don't be silly, don't be reckless, but be a little bit reckless. And be confident in that. And I think whether you're a producer, you're a writer, or a director, or a cinematographer, or a composer, or anything, go for it. You know, if you don't do it, if you don't try, it'll never happen.
I think that might be a good note to break on, because we're going to be back here this afternoon after lunch. Unless there's any pressing questions you're thinking of putting your hand up about. Okay.
Hello, John and Stephen. I'm very interested in following up with what you said, Stephen, about our responsibility to offer a variety of movies to the audience. And so I was wondering what, in your experience, if you could share some experience in when you have a movie that is probably something new, or it has a sensitive theme, or something that, that maybe the audience isn't so used to. So how do you get other people to also believe in that project? How do you convince that there is a market for it?
Yeah. That's a really good question. But I mean, I think that is you will spend your career as a producer selling your ideas.
Very true.
You're essentially a salesperson, right? As a creative
Therapist, salesperson, mother, father. But you're convincing other people. You're sharing. If you're enthusiastic, hopefully they will be enthusiastic. You know what I mean? If you believe in it, hopefully they will believe in it.
So how do you sell your idea?
Confidence and enthusiasm.
Seriously, one of the things you can do is to constantly practice your craft of selling your idea. So any opportunity you get, bounce your ideas off people.
That's a great point. We talked about this a lot in those pitching seminars where we would, you want to almost figure out what it is about your project in one sentence that is interesting for other people. You know what I mean? That can convince them, oh yeah, I know enough about it that I want to see this. I mean, that's ultimately what movie marketing department, like studio marketing departments do. Like that Carnosaur movie, it's still my favorite, you know, like driven to extinction, back for revenge. You know, it's like, okay, I want to see that movie. You know, or, I don't know, but hopefully you do, you know, and so I think you need to practice that. Figure out what it is at the core of your movie that other people will want to see. And maybe it's something very different, and that's a good thing. I mean, you know, there is a tendency, I think, in Hollywood to remake the same movie over or a different version of the same movie over and over and over again because it's safe. But I think that comes with the risk of a lot of money where you have to be safe, or you know, I don't think you have to be, but they think they have to be, and that's probably why I'm not the head of a studio. So when you're doing something different and you have less risk, there's a freedom in doing independent film because the budgets are smaller, there's less risk, and you have more latitude to do something different. And so look at maybe as a blessing rather than a curse. So.
Yeah, amazingly, you wouldn't normally recognize this, but you probably think of the major studios making the bigger blockbusters that obviously make enough money to keep the business going. But if you think of movies like The Shape of Water or Three Billboards or Get Out, they're all made by the smaller divisions within the studios. And they're only made because they have enough cash flow coming through the business to be able to take that risk. Now, the studio executives are smart enough to go, well, if we've got a great idea here that's a bit risky, but we can afford to spend a little money on it, it might break out and it might be golden.
But they mitigate that risk with a smaller budget. So all of those movies that you see, except for Shape of Water, which actually was a pretty decent sized budget. It wasn't like 100 million, but it was like, I think probably 40, you know, 35, I would imagine, I don't know. It looked like, you know, it was a beautiful movie. But those movies are all smaller budgets. To give you an example, I was just budgeting a movie for a director who, I mean, it's an amazing story. Like the script, you cry. It's so beautiful. And the producer asked me to do a budget and a schedule for it, and so I did. And they then went to the studio, and the studio said, no, we need it to be $8 million net. And I was like, we were at 15. So I had to try to cut half of the budget of the movie. I mean, that's like, if you're $1 million off, okay, we can shoot a few less days, we can, you know, figure out we're going to pay this person a little bit less, this actor, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, you know, maybe we can get the rights to the book, you know, deferred until later or something, you know, you just have to figure it out. But when you're cutting half the budget, that's really hard. And that's an example of, this would be a movie that's a little bit off the beaten track. It's more of an independent movie, but it was being financed by a studio. And they said, no, this is the number it has to be. That's the amount of risk we're willing to take on this movie. We eventually got it pretty close. You know, I was hoping they would, you know, come up a little bit, you know, and we got there, but they decided, and also because it was weather, that they would do it next year, but that process took a long time. So even with the major studios, it's not like they just write a check, you know, a blank check and say, yeah, go, you know, well, other than Netflix. I'm sure that'll change too, but you know, it is a business, and when they're taking risks, they're going to take this much risk or this much risk or this much risk, but there's always going to be financial constraints. So yeah, I mean, it's true. Those films that appeal to the audiences that like, you know, great films tend to be smaller budgets. So you can take chances and look at that as an opportunity.
Okay, well, we're going to come back for the sequel, the low-budget sequel, after lunch. Thank you very much, John, for the first one.
and please welcome Mr. Edwin as the Program Director of ICANN, and also
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's beautiful. Does that mean I'm done?
You'll get through it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you. Oh, here. Thank you. How's that?
All together?
Together? Should we come up front?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.